"I swear you'll never see me again," Emily yelled, her voice breaking as she signed the divorce papers. Michael smirked dismissively. Perfect. One less woman to worry about. 3 years later, he walked into the city's most exclusive restaurant, and the sight instantly froze him to his core. The black Bentley Continental GT purred, gliding to a gentle stop in front of the Palazzo di Cristallo, the most exclusive and notoriously expensive dining establishment in the entire metro area. Michael Harrington adjusted his platinum Patek Philippe watch as the valet sprinted over, eager to receive the keys. At his age, Michael was the living embodiment of business success, owner of the country's largest luxury hotel chain, commanding a fortune that easily surpassed $300 million and possessing a reputation that preceded him in every elite circle. "Good evening, Mr. Harrington," the valet greeted with an almost exaggerated bow. "It's an honor to welcome you back to our establishment." Michael offered that cold, calculated smile he'd perfected over years of cutthroat negotiations. His $15,000 Armani suit fit his athletic frame flawlessly, a physique maintained thanks to a personal trainer who cost him more per month than most people's annual salary. Every step he took resonated with the authority of a man who had genuinely never known the meaning of the word no. Tonight was momentous. He had just successfully closed the most significant acquisition of his career, a rival chain that would hand him a complete monopoly over luxury tourism in 3 states. It was a time to celebrate, and he had invited Victoria Hayes, the 28-year-old model he'd met at a charitable gala the previous week, a woman beautiful, sophisticated, and crucially utterly impressed by his wealth. The interior of the Palazzo di Cristallo was a dazzling display of opulence. Murano crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The walls showcased original art from European masters, and every table was adorned with fresh flowers imported daily from Holland. The prices were so steep that a single dinner could easily exceed the average monthly salary of 3 working families. Mr. Harrington, the maitre d', approached with a servile grin. "Your usual table is prepared. Are we expecting anyone else this evening?" "Yes, Ms. Hayes will arrive shortly. Ensure every detail is perfect." Michael responded, his voice possessing that authoritative tone developed from years of commanding hundreds of employees. As he was escorted to his table in the VIP area, Michael felt undeniably on top of the world. 3 years had flown by since his divorce. 3 years during which he had exponentially multiplied his fortune, dated the most beautiful women on the continent, and achieved every goal he'd set. Emily had been merely a temporary inconvenience on his ascent to greatness, a sharp lesson learned about keeping feelings separate from business. He settled into his Italian leather chair, gazing out the panoramic window at the city lights, a city that in his mind practically belonged to him. His empire stretched across the entire coast, encompassing 5-star hotels and private resorts where the global elite came to relax and conduct their deals. He was respected, feared, and envied in equal measure. "May I bring the wine list, sir?" a discreet waiter inquired. "The Chateau Pétrus, 1998. Michael replied, not even looking up at the young man. "And make absolutely certain it's at the precise temperature." Michael pulled out his gold-plated phone and checked his messages. Victoria had texted that she'd be a few minutes late due to traffic. Perfect. That gave him time to review emails from his international managers and confirm his meetings for tomorrow in Paris. While drafting a response about the construction of his newest hotel in Monaco, a figure approached his table holding a bottle of wine. By reflex, he looked up to confirm the label was correct. And that was the exact moment his world came to a complete stop. The gold phone slipped from his hands, clattering onto the floor with a metallic noise that sounded like a gong in the sudden silence that seized his mind. Emily. Emily Wilson stood directly across from him, holding the wine bottle with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. She wore the restaurant uniform, a pristine white blouse, a knee-length black skirt, and an apron that failed to conceal what he instantly saw hitting him like a direct punch to the heart. She was pregnant, very pregnant. The rounded belly was unmistakable beneath the uniform, likely around 7 months. Her face had changed. She had lost the youthful softness he remembered, replaced by lines of weariness and a pallor that spoke of constant worry and sleepless nights. Her hair, which she used to keep meticulously styled at expensive salons, was now pulled back into a simple, practical ponytail. But what impacted him most were her eyes. Those green eyes that had once regarded him with unconditional love now observed him with a crushing mix of shock, humiliation, and what seemed like pure panic. "Would you like me to open the bottle?" Sir Emily asked, her voice striving for professionalism but slightly cracking at the edges. Michael was frozen. His mind, which typically processed information at lightning speed to make multi-million-dollar business decisions, had simply disconnected. He couldn't process the reality of what he was seeing. Emily. His Emily, the woman he had cast out of his life like garbage 3 years prior, was standing before him, pregnant and waiting tables. Memories swirled in his head like an uncontrollable flood. Emily on their wedding day, radiant in a $50,000 gown, promising him eternal love. Emily in his penthouse, cooking for him on Sunday mornings, singing softly while preparing his coffee exactly the way he liked it. Emily crying that last night, pleading with him to consider having children, to think about building a family together. "Business is my sole priority," he had told her coldly. "A child would be an expensive and unnecessary distraction. If you cannot understand that, perhaps you are not the right woman for me." And now she was here, obviously expecting the child he had refused to have with her, working in a place where one single tip was likely more money than she saw in a week. Sir Emily repeated, her voice now more strained, aware that other patrons and staff were beginning to notice the strange tension at the table. "Would you like me to open the bottle?" Michael attempted to speak, but the words caught in his throat. How had Emily ended up here? After the divorce, he had ensured she received a decent financial compensation. He hadn't been overly generous, but he hadn't left her destitute either. What had happened to that money? Who was the father of the baby she was carrying? Michael stammered, feeling like a nervous adolescent for the first time in decades. Emily used his confusion to slightly tilt her head in a gesture that might have appeared professional to any onlooker, but he recognized as a silent, desperate plea. "Please don't make a scene. Not here. Not now." At that moment, the cheerful voice of Victoria echoed from the restaurant entrance. "Michael, sorry for the delay. Traffic was absolutely impossible." Victoria approached the table like an apparition from a different world in her designer dress that probably cost more than Emily earned in 6 months, her jewelry glittering under the restaurant lights, carrying the self-assurance that only comes from a life devoid of genuine financial worry. Emily saw Victoria approaching, and something in her expression shifted. The momentary vulnerability was replaced by a mask of professional dignity that broke Michael's heart in a way he couldn't comprehend. "Excuse me," Emily said with a firm voice. "I will send another server to assist you tonight." She turned to leave, but Michael, acting on an uncontrollable impulse, reached out and took her arm. "Emily, wait." She turned back to him, and for one fleeting second he saw in her eyes the raw 3-year-old pain and betrayal she had been carrying. But then Victoria arrived at the table. "Is everything all right, honey?" Victoria asked, curiously surveying the scene, Michael holding the arm of a pregnant waitress who looked ready to flee. Emily gently pulled free from Michael's grasp and addressed Victoria with flawless professional courtesy. "Everything is perfect, miss. Please enjoy your dinner." Without giving Michael another chance to speak, she walked away toward the kitchen, taking with her the emotional balance he had so meticulously constructed over the last 3 years. Victoria sat down completely oblivious to the personal earthquake that had just rocked her date. "Do you know that waitress? You looked like you knew each other," she commented casually while reviewing the menu. Michael stared at her as if she were speaking an alien language. His mind was still processing the image of Emily, pregnant, exhausted, working in a place where he spent in one night what she probably earned in months. He didn't lie automatically. "No, I don't know her." But while Victoria talked cheerfully about her shopping day and her plans for the weekend on his yacht, Michael couldn't stop looking toward the kitchen, desperately hoping to see the figure who had vanished, but who had left his world utterly shattered. For the first time in 3 years, Michael Harrington, the man who controlled empires and moved millions with a single call, felt completely lost. And the worst part was, he didn't understand why it mattered so much. The dinner became an exquisite form of torture. Michael pretended to listen to Victoria discuss her latest photo shoot in Milan, but his eyes obsessively searched for any trace of Emily among the waiters moving back and forth. Every time a female figure appeared in his peripheral vision, his heart accelerated only to sink upon realizing it wasn't her. "Michael, are you even listening to me?" Victoria had stopped talking and was looking at him with a mixture of annoyance and genuine concern. "You've been weird since you arrived. Did something go wrong with business?" "My apologies, honey." Michael forced his most charming smile, the one he had used to close multi-million-dollar contracts. "I'm just processing the details of the contract I closed today. It's a major step for the company." Victoria smiled, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. After all, she was accustomed to the powerful men she dated constantly thinking about money and business. It was part of the appeal. But Michael wasn't thinking about contracts. He was reliving every second of those few minutes with Emily, analyzing every detail as if it were evidence in a criminal investigation. The way her hands trembled, the pallor of her face, the dark circles that makeup couldn't completely hide, and above all that rounded belly that screamed a truth he refused to face. Emily had moved on, found someone else, realized the family dream he had destroyed. "You know what?" Victoria leaned toward him with a seductive smile. "After dinner, we could go back to your penthouse. I have a surprise for you." Under normal circumstances, Michael would have been delighted. Victoria was exactly the type of woman he gravitated toward, beautiful, sophisticated, and emotionally uncomplicated. But tonight, the mere idea of intimacy with anyone else felt impossible. His mind was entirely consumed by the image of Emily disappearing into the kitchen. Of course he lied, raising his wine glass. Here's to surprises. But as Victoria smiled and clinked her glass against his, Michael made a decision that would change the course of the night forever. "Excuse me for a moment." He stood up. "I need to take an important call. I'll be right back." Before Victoria could protest, Michael headed straight toward the back of the restaurant. His heart was pounding as if he were running a marathon. He hadn't planned this. He hadn't rehearsed what to say, but his body moved on its own accord toward the kitchen. He stopped in front of the swing doors that separated the elegant dining world from the harsh reality of the kitchen. Through the circular glass of one door, he could see inside, chefs rushing servers, gathering plates, the organized chaos of a fine dining operation in full swing. And then he saw her. Emily was sitting on a small chair in a corner, one hand resting on her lower back, the other holding a glass of water. Her face clearly showed signs of exhaustion, and for a moment, she closed her eyes as if gathering the strength to continue. Michael felt as if someone had twisted a knife in his chest. The woman who had once lived in a luxury penthouse, who had access to the finest spas and private doctors, who never had to worry about anything more than choosing which designer dress to wear, was now clearly struggling to stay on her feet during a work shift. Without another thought, he shoved the doors open and walked into the kitchen. The noise and chaos immediately assaulted him, the heat from the stoves, the sound of knives chopping, the shouted orders from the chefs. Several employees looked at him with surprise and alarm. Customers were definitely not permitted in the kitchen. "Sir, you can't be back here." A sous chef approached quickly, wiping his hands on his apron, but Michael didn't pay him any attention. His eyes were locked on Emily, who had looked up at the commotion and now stared at him with an expression of absolute horror. "Emily," he said, and his voice sounded foreign, even to him, charged with an emotion he didn't know how to manage. She immediately stood up with an effort that was painful to watch and approached him, her face flushed with shame. "Michael, you cannot be here," she whispered urgently, acutely aware that all the employees were watching them. "Please leave. I need to talk to you." He responded, completely disregarding the curious stares and the protests of the kitchen staff. "Not here. Not now." Emily grabbed his arm with more strength than he expected and guided him toward a back door that led to the alley. "Are you going to get me into trouble? I need this job." They stepped out into the cool night air, and for the first time in 3 years they were utterly alone. The contrast was brutal, the dirty, dimly lit alleyway versus the luxury of the restaurant they had left behind. Emily leaned against the brick wall, breathing heavily, one hand instinctively guarding her belly. "What do you want, Michael?" she asked. There was a hardness in her voice he had never heard before. "Did you come to gloat to confirm you were right about me? I didn't know you were working here." Michael felt like an idiot, stammering senseless words. "I didn't know you were pregnant." Emily let out a bitter laugh that shattered his heart. "Of course you didn't know. Why would you? 3 years ago, you made it very clear you wanted nothing more to do with my life." The memories of that final night rushed back like physical stabs, Emily crying, pleading with him to reconsider the divorce. He cold as ice, handing her the pre-prepared papers and telling her she could sign amicably or his lawyers would ensure she received nothing. "The divorce settlement," Michael mumbled. "I gave you enough to be set for years." Emily's expression hardened even further. "The divorce settlement? You mean the $50,000 you gave me after 5 years of marriage, after I built my entire life around yours?" Michael felt as if he had been slapped. In his mind, $50,000 had been a generous amount. For him, it was what he spent in a weekend. But now, seeing Emily pregnant and working as a waitress, he realized how ridiculously inadequate that sum had been. "Emily, you thought... What she interrupted him, and for the first time tears welled in her eyes. "You thought that amount could sustain me for the rest of my life. You thought after 5 years as your wife, where my sole job was to be perfect for your business events, it would be easy to find a job." Michael was speechless. Throughout their marriage, Emily had left her job as an art teacher to dedicate herself completely to being the perfect corporate wife. She had organized his events, decorated their homes, and been his companion at every major social function. He had never once paused to consider how difficult it would be for her to rebuild a career after the divorce. "How far along are you?" he asked, changing the subject because he couldn't bear to face his own guilt. Emily touched her abdomen unconsciously. 7.5 months. Michael did quick calculations. That meant she had gotten pregnant less than 6 months after their divorce. The idea of Emily with another man so soon after their separation hurt him in a way he didn't understand. "Who is the father?" he asked before he could stop himself. Emily looked at him as if he had struck her. "That is none of your business." "I just want to know if he's taking good care of you," Michael insisted, even though he knew he had no right to ask. "If you need help, I help." Emily let out another bitter laugh. "Now you want to help. Where was that concern when you left me with $50,000 and told me you never wanted to see me again?" Michael ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Emily, I didn't know. If you had known things were so bad for you, you would have done what she challenged him. Sent more money to quiet your conscience. Would you have hired someone to handle the problem for you? I don't know," he admitted, and the honesty of his answer surprised them both. Emily studied him in silence for a moment. In the dim light of the alley, Michael could see the lines of fatigue around her eyes, the way she clutched her back, the swelling in her feet that strained against the cheap uniform shoes. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is?" Emily asked softly. "It's not that I'm working as a pregnant waitress. It's not that I live in a 1-bedroom apartment that costs half of what you used to spend on wine every month. The saddest part is that for 5 years I truly believed you loved me." Those words hit Michael like a hammer blow. "Emily, I did love you." "No," she shook her head. "You loved the idea of me. A beautiful wife who looked good on your arm at galas. You loved that I was smart enough to hold interesting conversations with your associates, but not ambitious enough to compete with you. But you never loved me." At that moment, the restaurant's back door opened, and an older man in a manager's suit appeared. "Emily, they need you in the dining room." "And sir," he looked at Michael with clear disapproval, "you must return to your party. Customers are not allowed in employee areas." Michael wanted to protest. He wanted to demand more time, more answers, but the look of panic on Emily's face stopped him. "Please," she whispered. "Don't make me lose this job. It's the only thing I have." Without another word, Emily walked back inside, leaving Michael alone in the alley with more questions than answers, and a debilitating pain in his chest he couldn't understand how to soothe. When he returned to his table, Victoria was waiting with an impatient expression. "Where were you?" "Your food is getting cold." Michael sat down and stared at his $200 plate, the same amount Emily probably earned in an entire night's work. For the first time in his life, the luxury surrounding him felt obscene. "Victoria," he said abruptly, "I think we should leave." But as he paid the check with his limitless black card, his mind was already formulating a plan. This encounter was far from over. Michael didn't sleep that night, nor the next, nor the one after that. From his $20 million penthouse with a panoramic view of the entire city, he stayed awake until dawn, staring out the windows at the lights blinking below. Somewhere among those lights was Emily, likely in a small, inexpensive apartment, struggling to sleep with a 7.5-month belly while worrying about paying the rent. The image tormented him. For 3 years, he had managed to convince himself he had made the right choice. Marriage had been a mistake. Emily had been too emotional, too dependent, too human for the world he inhabited. He had told himself she would be better off without him, that she would find someone more suitable for her domestic needs, but seeing her at that restaurant had annihilated all his justifications. "Mr. Harrington." The voice of Carmen, his personal assistant, pulled him from his thoughts. "It's 10:30 a.m. Your meeting with the Japanese investors is in 1 hour." Michael turned from the window, realizing he was wearing the same clothes as the day before. Carmen looked at him with professional yet discreet concern. In the 5 years she had worked for him, she had never seen him so discomposed. "Cancel the meeting," Michael said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Sir Carmen blinked in surprise. "But it's the Tokyo Hotel's contract. They flew in specifically for this. Have Roberto handle it. Tell them I have a family emergency." Carmen opened her mouth to protest, but something in Michael's expression stopped her. In 5 years, he had never canceled an important meeting, never prioritized anything over business, and definitely never mentioned having a family. "Is there anything else I can do for you, sir?" she asked carefully. Michael looked at her for a long moment. Carmen was efficient, discreet, and had demonstrated absolute loyalty for years. If anyone could help him, it was her. "I need you to investigate someone," he finally said. "But this is completely confidential. Not a word to anyone, not even Roberto." Carmen nodded, pulling out her tablet. "Of course, sir. What do you need to know?" "Emily Wilson was Emily Harrington until 3 years ago. I need to know where she lives, her exact financial situation, where she's worked since the divorce, and above all," he paused, "I need to know everything about the man who got her pregnant." Carmen typed quickly without asking questions. She was too professional for that. But Michael could see the curiosity in her eyes. "How fast do you need this information by this afternoon?" Carmen nodded and moved toward the door, but Michael stopped her. "Carmen, one more thing. I want medical information too. I need to know if she and the baby are okay." This time Carmen couldn't completely hide her surprise, but she simply nodded before leaving the office. Michael spent the rest of the morning pacing his penthouse like a caged animal. He tried to work but couldn't concentrate. He tried to call Victoria, but the idea of feigning interest in her superficial conversation made him nauseous. He tried to go to the gym, but every repetition on the weight bench brought him back to the image of Emily clutching her aching back. At 3 p.m., Carmen returned with a thick folder and an expression Michael couldn't quite interpret. It wasn't exactly compassion, but it wasn't professional indifference either. "What did you find?" Michael asked immediately. Carmen sat across from his desk, clearly uncomfortable with what she had to report. "Mr. Harrington." "This is complicated." Michael prepared himself for the worst. "Tell me everything." "Emily Wilson lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Queens neighborhood. The rent is $800 a month, utilities included. She works at the Palazzo di Cristallo 5 nights a week, earning $12 an hour plus tips. She also works weekends cleaning houses in the Upper East Side." Each word was like a physical blow. Michael quickly calculated. Emily earned less in a month than he spent on a single business dinner, and the baby's father he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Carmen opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Here is where it gets painful. The father is David Miller, a 35-year-old architect. Emily began a serious relationship with him approximately 8 months after your divorce. My sources indicate he proposed when they found out about the pregnancy." Michael felt as if someone had twisted a knife in his chest and was slowly rotating it. Emily had moved on. She had found love again. She had been on the verge of marrying. "What happened?" he asked, his voice strained. Carmen looked at him with something akin to pity. David Miller had another secret. He was married. Married for 8 years with 2 small children. Emily didn't know. She discovered the truth when she was 5 months pregnant when the legitimate wife appeared at her apartment. Michael closed his eyes, imagining the scene, Emily pregnant and excited about her new life, discovering that the man she loved had been deceiving her the entire time. And what did he do? He claimed it had all been a mistake, that he never planned to leave his family. He offered her money to resolve the situation, and when Emily refused, he told her he wanted nothing more to do with the baby. Carmen paused. That was 2 months ago. He hasn't contacted her since. The information hit Michael like an avalanche. Emily had found love after him. She had built hopes for a new family only to discover she had been deceived again. And now she was alone, pregnant, working herself to exhaustion just to stay afloat. There's more. Carmen continued, consulting her notes. More. Emily has been going to a public clinic for her prenatal care because she cannot afford private health insurance. She's had some minor complications, high blood pressure, anemia, likely related to stress and overwork. Complications? Michael was instantly alarmed. Is the baby all right? According to medical records, both she and the baby are fine for now, but the doctors have recommended reducing her work hours and stress. Obviously, that hasn't been possible given her financial situation. Carmen produced more documents. I also uncovered something else about her situation after the divorce. Emily tried to return to work as an art teacher, but most private schools wouldn't hire her because she'd been out of the field for 5 years. Public schools had enormous waiting lists. She ended up working service jobs in stores and coffee shops. When she began to show the pregnancy, many employers fired her with flimsy excuses. Michael stood up abruptly, walking toward the window. Why didn't she contact me? Why didn't she ask for help when David abandoned her? Carmen looked at him with a strange expression. Sir, do you remember your last words to her? Michael vividly recalled that final night. If you ever have problems in life, they're not mine. You chose to leave. Now live with the consequences. He had been so cruel, so definitive. How could Emily have come to him for help after that? There's one more thing, Carmen said softly. Something I found in the hospital records. What? In the medical documentation, Emily put your name as her emergency contact. Michael spun around quickly. What? She has no family here, sir. Her parents died years ago. No siblings. When they asked who to call in case of emergency during labor, she put your name and your office number. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Why would she do that? He murmured, more to himself than to Carmen. Perhaps, Carmen suggested carefully, because despite everything that happened, you are still the most important person in her life. Michael slumped into his chair, overwhelmed by emotions he didn't know how to manage. Emily had been betrayed by 2 men. First by him, who had cruelly abandoned her, and then by David, who had deceived her and left her pregnant. And yet, when she needed to put down the name of someone she trusted in a medical emergency, she had put his. What am I going to do, Carmen? He asked, and for the first time in years his voice sounded vulnerable, human. That depends on you, sir. But if you allow me a personal observation, in 5 years working for you, I have never seen you so affected by anything that wasn't business. And Emily Wilson is the only person I've ever seen make you behave like a real human being instead of a money-making machine. Michael looked at Carmen in surprise. She had never spoken so directly. What do you suggest? I suggest you go see her, but not as the millionaire CEO coming to rescue the damsel in distress. Go as the man who still loves her and wants a chance to be better than he was before. Michael stood up with a determination he hadn't felt in years. You're right, but first I want you to do something for me. Anything you require. Contact the best private obstetrician in the city, Dr. Stevens at St. Jude's Hospital. Arrange an appointment for Emily under a false name if necessary, and I want you to pay her rent for the next 6 months anonymously. And if she refuses to accept the help, then I'll find another way. Michael headed toward the door. But I will not allow the woman I love to raise her child in poverty, when I have the power to change that. Carmen remained silent for a moment. Sir, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Emily is not just a pregnant ex-wife who needs help. She is a woman who has been betrayed by two men who is fighting to maintain her dignity while raising a child alone. If you are going to re-enter her life, you must be prepared to stay. She cannot bear to be abandoned a third time. Michael stopped at the door, considering Carmen's words. For 3 years he had lived believing he didn't need anyone, that love was a weakness, that family was a distraction from important business. But seeing Emily pregnant and struggling alone had demolished all those beliefs. Carmen, for 3 years, I've been the richest and most miserable man in the country. I've had everything money can buy, and I haven't been happy a single day. But in the 5 minutes I spent talking to Emily in that alley, I felt more alive than I had in years. He opened the door and turned back to Carmen one last time. I am going to get my family back. Not the family I had, but the family I should have built if I hadn't been such an idiot and so full of pride. And the fact that the baby is not biologically yours. Michael smiled for the first time in days, but it was a different smile. It wasn't the cold, calculated smile of the ruthless CEO. It was the smile of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. Carmen, that baby is going to grow up without a father because a coward abandoned him. If Emily gives me the chance, I am going to be the best father that child could ever have, regardless of who fathered him. As the elevator carried him toward the parking garage, Michael no longer thought about million-dollar contracts or corporate empires. He thought about Emily cleaning houses at 7 months pregnant. He thought about her crying alone in her apartment when David abandoned her. He thought about her putting his name as her emergency contact because she had no one else. But above all, he thought about the opportunity life was giving him to be the man he should have been from the beginning. The war to win Emily back had begun, and this time, he wasn't going to lose. Michael arrived at the Palazzo di Cristallo at 7:30 p.m., but this time he did not arrive in his black Bentley with a chauffeur. He had left the luxury car at home and taken a taxi, aware that showing up with all his ostentation would be the exact opposite of what he needed to do. Tonight, he wasn't the millionaire CEO visiting an exclusive restaurant. He was a desperate man trying to win back the woman he had lost because of his own stupidity. He stood on the sidewalk for 10 full minutes, observing through the restaurant windows, searching for Emily among the elegantly moving servers. His heart was pounding so loudly he could hear it over the traffic noise. He didn't have a plan. He hadn't rehearsed what to say. He only knew he couldn't endure another night knowing what he now knew without doing something about it. When he finally saw her, his legs almost gave out. Emily was serving a table of businessmen, smiling professionally as she took their order. But Michael could see beyond the professional mask. He could see how she discreetly held her lower back when she thought no one was watching. He could see the fatigue in her eyes, the extra foundation she had applied to conceal the dark circles in her belly, more prominent now that he saw her in profile, carrying the child of a man who had abandoned her without a glance back. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" the maitre d' asked when he finally entered the restaurant. No, but Michael started, then stopped. He couldn't use his name. Emily worked here, and if her colleagues discovered that the millionaire CEO Michael Harrington was there for her, it could cause her problems. "Could you seat me at a table in the section that waitress is working?" He discreetly pointed toward Emily. The maitre d' followed his gaze and frowned slightly. "Sir, Emily is attending the VIP area tonight. Those tables require a minimum spend of $500. "Perfect." Michael responded immediately, pulling out his wallet. 10 minutes later, he was seated at a table for two in Emily's section, pretending to study the menu while in reality scrutinizing her every movement, the way she moved slower than normal, the way she took a deep breath before lifting heavy trays, the way she smiled at customers with perfect professional courtesy. But the smile vanished the instant she thought no one was observing. Emily had not seen him yet. She was preoccupied with a table of 6 people who were clearly running her ragged with constant demands. Michael watched with growing indignation as one of the men yelled at her for bringing sparkling water instead of still water, and how Emily apologized repeatedly while hurrying to correct the error. When she finally finished with that table and headed toward his, Michael saw the exact moment she recognized him. Her steps slowed, her posture tensed, and an expression of pure panic crossed her face before she could control it. She approached his table with the same professional expression she had used the night before, but Michael could see her hands trembling slightly as she held the notepad. "Good evening," she said in a carefully controlled voice. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Emily, Michael said softly. "We need to talk." "I am working," she replied quickly, her eyes flicking nervously toward her coworkers. "If you wish to place an order, I've been investigating." Michael interrupted her and saw her eyes widen in shock. "I know about David. I know what he did to you." Emily's face went completely pale. Her notepad slipped from her hands and fell to the floor with a clatter that made several people look over. "You can't be here talking about that," Emily whispered desperately, bending down to retrieve the notepad. "Please, Michael, they will fire me." "Then come with me." Michael stood up. "Let's go somewhere we can talk privately." "I can't leave my shift," Emily protested, her voice breaking. "I need this job. I need every penny." "What for, Emily?" he asked directly. "To pay the rent on a terrible apartment, to buy cheap food that doesn't provide the nutrition you need, for a public clinic where they treat you like cattle." Emily looked at him as if he had slapped her. "How dare you? How dare you investigate my private life? Who gave you the right to? The right is given to me by the fact that I love you." Michael exploded, his voice loud enough for several tables to turn and look. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stood paralyzed, staring at him with an expression of total shock. Michael realized he had just spoken the words he had been denying even to himself for 3 years. "Miss Emily." The restaurant manager's voice, Mr. Diaz, cut the tension like a knife. "Is there a problem here?" Emily turned to the manager, clearly panicking. "No, Mr. Diaz, everything is fine. The gentleman was just leaving," Michael said firmly, pulling out a $100 bill and placing it on the table. "But first, I would like to speak with you about Emily." "With me?" Mr. Diaz looked confused. "Yes." "Are you aware that Emily is 7.5 months pregnant?" "Of course I know," the manager replied defensively. "But as long as she can perform her duties, and are you aware that doctors have recommended she reduce her work hours due to stress-related complications?" Mr. Diaz looked at Emily in surprise. "Is that true?" Emily opened her mouth to respond, but Michael continued. "And are you aware that she is working 2 jobs because the salary you pay her here is not enough to cover her basic expenses?" "Sir," the manager now looked uncomfortable. "I don't know who you are, but the employment matters of our staff are—" "I am Michael Harrington," Michael said, and saw the manager stiffen as he recognized the name. "And Emily is my ex-wife." If there was silence before, there was a total void now. Michael could see other employees and patrons trying to discreetly eavesdrop. He could see the absolute mortification on Emily's face. "My ex-wife," he repeated, deliberately emphasizing the title, "who is now pregnant and working herself to exhaustion because I was an idiot who left her with nothing when we divorced." Michael continued, no longer caring who was listening. "And she deserves much more respect and consideration than she is receiving here." Emily finally found her voice. "Michael, stop, please stop." But there were tears running down her cheeks, and they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of something far more complex: relief, confusion, fear, and perhaps just maybe a sliver of the old hope that had been buried for 3 years. "Mr. Harrington." The manager was clearly nervous now, likely calculating how much money someone like Michael spent at the restaurant. "If there is anything we can do to better accommodate Emily." "What you can do," Michael said firmly, "is give her the rest of the night off. I will pay for any lost tips." "That is not necessary," Emily protested weakly. "Yes, it is." Michael looked her directly in the eyes. "Because we are going to dinner somewhere you can sit comfortably, order what you truly want to eat, and talk without worrying about impressing customers." "I can't," Emily whispered. "I can't do this again, Michael." "Do what again? Trust you?" She replied, the words emerging as a sob. "I cannot trust that you won't disappear again when you tire of playing the savior." Michael felt as if every word were a direct stab to the heart, but he knew he deserved every single one of them. "You are right," he admitted. You have every right in the world not to trust me. I was a coward 3 years ago. I was cruel. I was everything I never should have been to you." He stepped closer, aware that everyone was watching, but he no longer cared. "But Emily, what I discovered about David, about how he abandoned you, about how you've been struggling alone, I cannot live with that. I cannot wake up every day knowing that the woman I love is carrying all that weight alone. The woman you love." Emily repeated, a mix of disbelief and pain in her voice. "Now you love me. After 3 years of silence, after seeing me at my worst moment, I have loved you all these years." Michael admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "Every day I spent convincing myself I had done the right thing. A part of me knew I had made the worst mistake of my life, but I was too proud, too stubborn to admit it." Emily wiped her tears with the back of her hand, slightly smudging her makeup. "And what changed?" she asked. "What changed to bring you here now, causing a scene in my workplace, saying things that—" "What changed," Michael interrupted her, "is that I realized I've spent 3 years being the richest and most miserable man in the country. What changed is that I saw you last night and remembered what it felt like to be alive. What changed is that I discovered you have been betrayed by 2 men, and I cannot be the second man to abandon you without fighting for you." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the awkward silence of minutes ago. It was the silence of 2 people truly seeing each other for the first time in 3 years, seeing not the idealized or demonized versions they had constructed in their minds, but the real wounded people standing before them. "Emily," Mr. Diaz interrupted gently. "Do you want to take the rest of the night off? There will be no issue with your job." Emily looked between the manager and Michael, clearly tortured by the decision. "If you come with me," Michael said softly, "it won't be like before. It won't be the millionaire rescuing the damsel in distress. It will be 2 people who hurt each other trying to see if they can heal together." Emily closed her eyes for a long moment, as if gathering the courage to make a life-altering decision. When she opened them, there was a silent determination in her eyes. "Give me 5 minutes to change," she finally said. Michael felt as though he could fly. "Just dinner," Emily quickly clarified. "A conversation. That's all I'm promising." "That's all I'm asking," Michael responded. Though they both knew he was asking for much more than that. He was asking for a second chance to be the man he should have been from the beginning. He was asking for the opportunity to love not just Emily, but the child she carried in her womb. He was asking for the opportunity to build the family he had been too idiotic to value the first time. As Emily disappeared toward the employee locker room, Michael stood in the restaurant, acutely aware that the coming hours would determine the rest of his life. Either he would win back the woman of his dreams, or he would lose her forever. And for the first time in 3 years, something mattered more than making money. He cared about winning back Emily's heart. Michael had chosen the restaurant carefully. Little Italy Eats, a cozy family-run spot 10 minutes from the Palazzo di Cristallo. It wasn't exclusive or expensive. It had no linen tablecloths or crystal chandeliers. It was the exact opposite of the places he used to take Emily when they were married. It was real, authentic, the kind of place where a pregnant woman could sit comfortably without feeling judged by her appearance. Emily had emerged from the locker room wearing maternity jeans and a simple blue cotton top that made her green eyes sparkle in a way Michael had forgotten was possible. Without her work makeup and with her hair down over her shoulders, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the woman he had fallen for years ago, but she also looked exhausted. The dark circles were more evident without makeup, and Michael could see how every step cost her an effort she tried to hide. "How did you get here?" Michael asked as they walked slowly down the sidewalk. "By bus," Emily replied simply. Michael felt a pang of guilt. "How long does it take you to get from your apartment to the restaurant?" "An hour and a half," she admitted. "I have to take 2 different buses." Michael did quick mental math. Emily traveled 3 hours a day just to commute on her feet, 7.5 months pregnant, while he complained if his chauffeur was 5 minutes late. "Emily, that is." "No," she stopped him before he could finish. "Let's not start with that. Let's not start with pity or how much my life is different from yours. If we're going to do this, if we're going to have this conversation, it has to be between equals. Michael nodded, though he didn't fully grasp how they could be equals when the difference in their circumstances was so vast. When they arrived at the restaurant, Michael immediately noticed Emily relax slightly. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with soft background music and the aroma of homemade Italian food filling the air. The hostess, an older woman with a genuine smile, led them to a quiet corner table. "Something to drink," to start the waitress. A young woman who couldn't have been more than 20 asked. "Water with lemon, please," Emily replied. And for you, Sir Michael was about to order his usual $200 bottle of Cabernet when he stopped. "Water with lemon for me, too." Emily looked at him in surprise but said nothing. When the waitress left, they sat in silence for several minutes, both studying the menus as if they were complex legal documents. Finally, Emily was the first to speak. "Why now, Michael?" she asked without looking up from the menu. "Why, after 3 years of absolute silence, do you show up in my life just when I'm at my most vulnerable moment?" Michael placed his menu on the table. "Because I'm a coward." Emily looked up, surprised by the brutal honesty of his answer. "For 3 years," Michael continued, "I've had your phone number memorized. I've driven through your neighborhood hundreds of times without the courage to stop. I've started writing emails I never sent. I've been in a self-imposed misery because I was too proud to admit I'd made the biggest mistake of my life." "And what changed?" Emily asked softly. "Seeing you pregnant forced me to face something I had been denying." Michael admitted. "It forced me to face the fact that while I was playing the successful bachelor, you had found someone else, you had moved on, you had built the family I had refused to have with you." Emily lowered her gaze, her hands moving unconsciously to protect her belly. "But when I found out the truth about David," Michael continued, "when I found out he lied to you, used you, and abandoned you, exactly the way I did, I couldn't live with myself knowing you had been betrayed by 2 men. And that I was the first." "David wasn't like you," Emily said in a low voice. "What do you mean?" Emily took a deep breath before answering. "When you divorced me, at least you were honest about what you wanted. You told me directly you didn't want children, that you didn't want an emotionally taxing wife, that you wanted to be free to focus on your business. It was cruel, but it was honest." Michael felt every word like a slap, but he let her continue. "David made me believe he loved me. He made me believe he wanted to build a family with me. He made me believe that this time I had found someone who truly saw me as a partner, not an accessory." Tears began to well up in her eyes. "Do you know what it's like to find out that everything you've hoped for, everything you've put your faith in, is a lie? Do you know what it's like to be 5 months pregnant, excited to show your fiancé the baby's ultrasound, only to have his wife show up at your door?" Michael closed his eyes, imagining the scene. "Emily, I am so sorry." "I don't want your pity," she quickly replied. "That's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" Emily looked him directly in the eyes for the first time that night. "Because when you asked me who to put as an emergency contact at the hospital, the only name I could think of was yours." The silence that followed was charged with meaning. Michael could feel his heart pounding so hard he was sure Emily could hear it. Why, he whispered. "Because despite everything that happened between us, despite how our marriage ended, I never doubted that if I truly needed you, if I were in genuine danger, you would come for me." Michael felt as if someone had wrapped his heart in a giant hand and squeezed it. "I would always come for you," he admitted. "Always." At that moment, the waitress returned. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" Emily ordered simple pasta with tomato sauce and a small salad. Michael ordered the same, although he normally would have chosen the most expensive item on the menu. When they were alone again, Emily continued, "Do you know what the real difference between the two of you was? You broke my heart because you were honest about who you were. You told me from the start that business was your priority, that you didn't want emotional complications. I was the idiot who thought she could change you." Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Emily continued, "David broke my heart because he lied about who he was. He made me believe he was the man I needed when he was really a liar who already had a family. But the most important difference, she interrupted him, is that with you, even in our worst moments, I never felt you were a bad man. I felt you were a man who was afraid to love. With David, when I discovered the truth, I realized he was simply a bad man. Michael leaned forward. And what am I now? Emily studied him for a long moment. I don't know. That's the truth. I don't know if you're the same scared man from 3 years ago or if you've actually changed. What would I have to do to prove to you that I've changed? I don't know, Emily admitted. But I do know what you can't do. You can't show up in my life as the millionaire savior who's going to rescue me from my poverty. You can't use your money to buy me back, and you can't promise me things you aren't sure you can deliver. Michael nodded. What can I do then? Emily placed her hands over her belly, looking down for a moment before meeting his eyes again. Can you tell me the truth about why you're really here? Not the romantic version about lost love, the real truth. Michael took a deep breath. This was his chance to be completely honest or lose her forever. The truth, he began slowly, is that for 3 years, I've been empty. I've made more money, I've expanded my empire, I've dated beautiful women, and I haven't felt anything real, anything genuine. Emily listened in silence. The truth is that seeing you pregnant forced me to realize that while I was playing the successful bachelor, you had moved on and found what I had been too cowardly to seek with you. And that bothered you. It crushed me, Michael admitted. It crushed me because it made me realize I had lost not just a wife, but the opportunity to be a father, to have a real family, to have something in my life that mattered more than the numbers in a bank account. Michael paused as their food arrived, but neither immediately started eating. And what do you want now? Emily asked. I want the opportunity to be the man I should have been with you. I want the opportunity to love not just you, but the baby you're carrying. I want the opportunity to be the father that child deserves, even if I'm not his biological father. Emily blinked in surprise. You know he's not yours? Yes, Michael replied without hesitation. And I don't care. A child is going to grow up without a father because a coward abandoned him. If you give me the chance, I'm going to be the best father that child could ever have. Tears began to stream down Emily's cheeks. Why would you do that? Because I love you, Michael replied simply. Because I wasted 3 years pretending I didn't, and I don't want to waste another day. And because that baby is going to be a part of you, which automatically makes him the most important thing in the world to me. Emily wiped her tears with a napkin. Michael, this isn't a romantic movie. This is real life. Being a father to a baby that isn't biologically yours, especially when the mother has been betrayed by 2 men, isn't just a romantic decision you make at a restaurant. I know, Michael responded. That's why I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm asking for the chance to prove to you that I'm serious. How Michael took a deep breath. Let me help you with the pregnancy. Not as the millionaire who rescues you, but as the man who loves you and wants to make sure you and the baby are okay. Let me take you to your doctor appointments. Let me be there when the baby is born. Let me prove to you day after day that I won't disappear. Emily looked at him for a long moment. And what if you find out it's harder than you thought? What if the baby cries all night? What if I have postpartum depression? What if the reality of having a family isn't as romantic as it seems now? Then we'll face it together, Michael replied without hesitation, as it should have been from the start. Emily finally took a bite of her pasta, chewing slowly as she processed everything she had heard. I have a condition, she finally said. Anything. If we do this, if I give you this chance, it can't be gradual. You can't start by being the weekend boyfriend who shows up when it's convenient. If you want to be part of our lives, you have to be completely committed from the start. Michael nodded immediately. What exactly does that mean? It means that when the baby is born, you're going to be there. When he has colic at 3 a.m., you're going to be there. When diaper changes are needed, you're going to be there. When I'm exhausted and hormonal and completely impossible to tolerate, you're going to be there. I'll be there, Michael promised. And your business is I can run my company from anywhere. Technology allows me to hold virtual meetings, sign contracts electronically, and I have capable employees who can handle daily operations. Emily smiled for the first time all night, though it was a small, cautious smile. Michael Harrington, the obsessive workaholic, is willing to work from home to change diapers. Michael Harrington, the man who lost the most important woman in his life by being a work-obsessed idiot, is willing to do whatever it takes not to lose this second chance he corrected. Emily placed her fork on the table and looked him directly. "One chance," she finally said. "I'm going to give you one chance. But Michael, if you hurt me again, if you disappear when things get tough, if you decide this wasn't what you really wanted, there won't be a third opportunity." Michael felt as if he had won the lottery and climbed Mount Everest simultaneously. "There will be no need for a third opportunity," he promised. "This time, I'm going to get it right." As they finished their dinner talking about doctors' baby preparations and plans for the future, Michael realized something fundamental. For the first time in 3 years, he was completely happy. He hadn't closed $1 million contract, he hadn't won a business competition, he hadn't acquired a new property, he had simply regained the hope of having a family, and that was worth more than all the money in the world. Michael woke up at 5:30 a.m. the following Monday with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years: genuine purpose. It wasn't the artificial adrenaline of closing $1 million deal or the empty satisfaction of beating a competitor. It was something much deeper and more terrifying: a genuine responsibility toward another person. Emily had a doctor's appointment at 9 a.m. at the public clinic, and he had insisted on taking her. Over the past 3 days since their revealing dinner, they had talked on the phone every night. Cautious but gradually warmer conversations where he learned details about her pregnancy that filled him with both excitement and a devastating guilt for everything he had missed. He showered quickly and dressed, but for the first time in decades, he didn't put on one of his $5,000 suits. Instead, he chose jeans and a simple cotton shirt. He wanted to look accessible, normal, like someone who could be genuinely comfortable in the public clinic where Emily had been receiving prenatal care. His chauffeur, Carlos, was waiting at the building entrance as always, but Michael stopped him before he could open the Bentley door. "Carlos, I'm driving myself today," he told him, heading toward his more discreet BMW. "Sir Carlos," Michael cut in. "Cancel all my meetings this week. I'll be busy with personal matters." During the drive to Emily's apartment, Michael felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation he hadn't experienced since his first date as a teenager. His hands were sweaty as he drove through streets that led to a neighborhood he had never visited, toward a life he had never imagined he would want to live. The Queens neighborhood was exactly what he had expected, and worse. 4-story apartment buildings with peeling paint, small family businesses with handwritten signs, children playing on the sidewalks because there were no nearby parks. It was the type of place he had escaped from in his youth and sworn never to return to. But now, as he parked in front of Emily's building, he didn't feel contempt or pity. He felt respect for a woman who had managed to maintain her dignity and build a life in circumstances that would have broken him. Apartment 3B was on the 3rd floor, and there was no elevator. Michael climbed the concrete stairs, noting the cracks in the walls and the smell of dampness that permeated the building. When he knocked, Emily opened the door almost immediately, as if she had been waiting by the entrance. "You're early," she said, but there was a small smile on her face that made Michael's heart race. "I wanted to make sure we were on time," he replied. Then his breath hitched. Emily was wearing a simple navy blue maternity dress that probably cost less than $30, but she looked more beautiful than he remembered ever seeing her. Her belly was more prominent than it had appeared under the restaurant uniform, and there was a glow to her skin that he had heard about, the pregnancy glow, but had never truly seen. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Almost." Emily disappeared inside the apartment for a moment, returning with a manila folder that clearly contained all her medical documents. "Are you sure you want to do this? The public clinic isn't exactly St. Jude's Hospital." Michael gently took her hand. "I want to be at every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every important moment of this pregnancy. I don't care if it's at the most basic clinic in the world." As they walked down the stairs, Michael noticed Emily holding the handrail and stopping briefly at each landing. His immediate instinct was to offer help, but something in her expression told him she needed to maintain her independence. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked instead. "Fine. Emily replied automatically. Then she corrected herself. Well, not exactly fine. The baby has been very active at night. I think he's going to be a soccer player. Michael smiled. Can I feel him move? Emily paused on the second floor, looking at him in surprise. Seriously, you want to, if you don't mind. Emily took his hand and placed it on her belly. At first, Michael felt nothing but the warmth of her skin through the dress fabric. But then, as if the baby had been waiting for the introduction, he felt a defined movement against his palm. Oh my God, he whispered, and there were tears in his eyes he hadn't expected. He's real. He's truly real. Of course he's real. Emily laughed softly. What did you think I don't know? Michael admitted, keeping his hand on her belly as he felt another movement. I guess part of me still couldn't believe you were going to be a mother. And now Michael looked her directly in the eyes. Now I know you're going to be the most incredible mother in the world, and that baby is going to be the luckiest child to have you. The moment was interrupted by a door opening on the second floor. A woman poked her head out, saw Emily with an unfamiliar man, and smiled. Buenos dias, mi hija, she said to Emily in Spanish. How is the baby today? Very active, Mrs. Rodriguez. Emily replied warmly. Michael, this is my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez, he's Michael. Mrs. Rodriguez studied Michael with the evaluating gaze of an older woman who had seen enough life to judge a person's character in seconds. So you are the famous Michael, she said in slow, deliberate Spanish. Famous Michael looked at Emily in confusion. Emily blushed slightly. I might have mentioned you once or twice. More like once or twice every day, Mrs. Rodriguez corrected with a knowing smile. I hope you are a better man than she deserves, because this girl is a treasure. Yes, ma'am, Michael replied in his perfect Spanish, surprising both Emily and Mrs. Rodriguez. I will do my best to be worthy of her. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded in approval. Good. And if you don't, the whole neighborhood will know. As they continued down to the car, Emily looked at him curiously. I didn't know you spoke Spanish, too. I grew up in neighborhoods like this, Michael admitted, before my company took off before the expensive suits and luxury cars. But I hadn't used it in so long I thought I'd forgotten it. You never mentioned that when we were married. When we were married, I was trying to be someone I wasn't. Michael replied honestly. I was trying to convince myself I had completely left my past behind. When they reached the car, Emily stopped when she saw the BMW. This is your car, one of them, Michael admitted. Would you prefer we took a taxi? No, it's much more normal than I expected. I'm trying to be more normal. Michael smiled, though I'm not sure it's working. The drive to the clinic took 20 minutes, during which Emily told him about her experiences with the public healthcare system. Michael listened with growing horror to stories of canceled appointments, long waiting times, and doctors who treated her quickly because they had too many patients and too little time. Emily, he said when they parked in front of the clinic, why didn't you tell me how bad your healthcare was? When was I supposed to tell you? She countered. During the 3 years we didn't speak. The guilt hit him like a wave. You're right. But now that we know what we know, could we consider transferring you to a private doctor? Emily immediately tensed. Michael, we talked about this. You can't just show up and start buying solutions to all my problems. I'm not trying to buy solutions, Michael protested. I'm trying to ensure you and the baby get the best care possible. And what if things don't work out between us? Emily asked directly. What if in 2 months you decide this is harder than you thought? Am I going to be stuck with private medical bills I can't afford? Michael was silent for a moment, processing the validity of her concerns. You're right, he admitted finally. I haven't thought about this from your perspective. What do you suggest? I suggest we start with the small things, Emily replied. Come with me to this appointment. Meet the doctor, see what my medical care is really like, and then if you still want to help with the medical aspects after a few weeks, we can talk about options. Michael nodded. Fair enough. The clinic was exactly what he had expected. Crowded waiting rooms, uncomfortable plastic chairs, faded posters on the walls, and a smell of disinfectant that couldn't completely hide other less pleasant odors. Emily checked in at reception and was told the doctor was running 45 minutes late. "Is this normal?" Michael asked her as they sat in chairs that clearly hadn't been designed for pregnant women. "Completely normal," Emily replied, adjusting herself as best she could. "Sometimes I wait 2 hours." Michael looked around the waiting room. There were other pregnant women, some with small children running around, others clearly dealing with high-risk pregnancies, all waiting patiently in conditions he wouldn't have tolerated 5 minutes for a business appointment. "How do you do this?" he murmured. "Do what maintain your patience, your dignity, your hope in a place like this." Emily looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully interpret. "Michael, most women in the world receive their prenatal care in places like this or much worse places. I'm not special for having to do it." "You are special to me," he replied without thinking. Emily was silent, but he could see a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When her name was finally called, Emily stood up with the visible effort required at 7.5 months pregnant. "You can come in with me, Michael," she asked. "It can be intense, more sure than ever." Dr. Ramirez's office was small but clean, with an examination table that had seen better days and medical equipment that was functional but clearly not state-of-the-art. The doctor himself was a man in his 50s with a warm smile and hands that trembled slightly, probably from too much caffeine and too little sleep. "Emily, how are you feeling?" the doctor asked as he reviewed her file. "And who is your companion?" "This is Michael," Emily replied. "He's going to be involved in the pregnancy." Dr. Ramirez looked at Michael curiously. The father, Emily, and Michael exchanged a quick glance. "It's complicated," Emily finally replied. "Modern families usually are complicated." Dr. Ramirez smiled. "The important thing is that the baby has people who love him." For the next 30 minutes, Michael watched fascinated as the doctor examined. Emily listened to the baby's heartbeat and took measurements he noted in a file that seemed too thin to hold all the important medical information of a pregnancy. But what impressed him most was how Dr. Ramirez treated Emily. Despite the clinic's chaotic environment, despite clearly being rushed, he gave her his full attention, responded to all her questions with patience, and treated her with the same respect he would have shown a private patient. "Everything looks good," the doctor finally announced. "The baby is growing normally. Your blood pressure is better than last time, and by my calculations, you have about 8 weeks left." 8 weeks, Michael repeated, and there was panic in his voice. "First baby?" Dr. Ramirez asked with a knowing smile. "In a sense," Michael admitted. "Don't worry. 8 weeks is enough time to prepare, especially if Emily has a good support system." As they left the clinic, Michael was unusually silent. Emily noticed it as they headed toward the car. "Are you okay?" she asked him. 8 weeks, Michael murmured. "In 8 weeks you're going to be a mother." "Yes," Emily replied simply. "And if all goes well between us in 8 weeks, I'm going to be a father." Emily stopped by the car, studying his expression. "Are you panicking?" Michael considered the question honestly. "I should be panicking. A week ago, my biggest concern was whether I was going to close the Tokyo contract. Now I'm thinking about diapers and bottles and how to properly hold a baby. And how do you feel about that?" Michael looked her directly in the eyes. "I feel more scared and more excited than I have felt in my entire life." Emily smiled, the first completely genuine smile he had seen since they reconnected. "Good," she said, "because being a father shouldn't be easy. If it were easy, anyone could do it right." As they drove back toward Emily's apartment, Michael realized something fundamental. For the first time in his adult life, he was facing something he couldn't buy, manipulate, or control with his wealth and power. He was going to have to earn his place in this family day by day, decision by decision, moment by moment. And the idea, instead of terrorizing him, filled him with a determination that never felt before. This time he was going to get it right because Emily and that baby deserved nothing less than the best of him. And he was determined to give it to them. Michael woke up at 3:47 a.m. the following Monday, not to an alarm, but to a sound he had learned to recognize immediately, Emily breathing shallowly in the bed next to him. In the last 3 weeks since he had officially moved into her apartment after discreetly renovating it to be more comfortable. He had developed an internal radar for any sign that labor might be starting. "Are you all right?" he mumbled gently, turning on the nightlight. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, one hand on her lower back, the other on her massive belly. At 39 weeks, she looked like she had swallowed a basketball, but to Michael, she had never been more beautiful. I think it's time," she whispered, and there was a mix of excitement and pure terror in her voice. Michael shot up immediately, fully awake. Over the past weeks, he had practiced this moment in his mind hundreds of times. He had read all the books on childbirth. He had taken prenatal classes with Emily. He had packed and repacked the hospital bag 3 times. "How long have you been feeling contractions?" he asked in a calm voice, despite his heart racing like a Ferrari engine. "Since midnight," Emily admitted. "I didn't want to wake you until I was sure." "Emily." Michael stood up and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You promised me you'd wake me immediately when it started. We're in this together." Remember, the last 2 months had been the most radical transformation of Michael's life. He had cut his work schedule in half. He had learned to cook healthy meals for pregnant women. He had painted the nursery with his own hands and read more books on parenting than on business strategy. But most importantly, he had learned to be present, truly present. "Another one," Emily whispered, squeezing his hands with surprising strength. Michael looked at his watch, timing the duration as they had practiced. 45 seconds. How long between this one and the last? About 5 minutes. Emily took a deep breath as the contraction passed. "It's time to go to the hospital," Michael declared, but Emily stopped him as he stood up to grab the keys. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you before the baby is born." "What is it?" He sat back down in front of her, worried by the seriousness in her voice. "Over these 2 months, you've been the man I always dreamed you could be. You've been patient when I was hormonal and impossible. You've been there for every appointment, every midnight, craving every moment of panic. You've read more books on babies than I have." Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "But I need you to know that what you did for me, what you sacrificed to be here, is more than I ever expected from anyone." Michael felt as if his heart were about to explode. "Emily, I didn't sacrifice anything. I gained everything." Another contraction, she whispered. And this time, Michael could see it was more intense. As he helped her breathe through the contraction, Michael realized something that filled him with such intense emotion he could barely breathe. In a few hours, he was going to meet his son, because that was what the baby had come to mean to him, his child, regardless of biology. The drive to the hospital was a mixture of controlled panic and pure emotion. Emily was having contractions every 3 minutes now, and Michael drove with one hand while holding hers with the other. "Do you remember what you said that night at the restaurant?" Emily asked during a pause between contractions. "What specifically?" "I said a lot of stupid things that night." Emily laughed despite the pain. "You said you wanted the opportunity to be the father this baby deserved." "And I meant it," Michael immediately replied. "I know. And I want you to know that you already are. You've been his father since the moment you decided to stay." When they arrived at the hospital, everything became a blur of activity: nurses, doctors, forms rooms, beeping machines. But through all the chaos, Michael never let go of Emily's hand. For the next 8 hours, he lived through every contraction with her. He breathed through every moment of pain. He encouraged her when she was exhausted and became her anchor in the sea of intensity that is labor. "I can see the head," the doctor shouted at 11:47 a.m. "Emily, on the next contraction, I need you to push with everything you have." Michael looked where the doctor was pointing and saw something that changed him forever. The small head of his son, covered in dark hair, making its way into the world. "Oh my God," he whispered, and tears were streaming down his face. "Emily, can I see him? Can I see our baby?" "Our baby?" Emily asked between gasps. "Our baby," Michael confirmed without hesitation. "Completely ours." With a final contraction that made Emily cry out with an intensity Michael had never heard, the baby fully entered the world. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. Immediately, the room filled with the most beautiful sound Michael had ever heard, the strong, healthy cry of his son. "Dad, would you like to cut the cord?" the nurse asked, extending a pair of scissors toward Michael. For a moment, Michael was paralyzed. Dad. They were calling him Dad. Go, Emily whispered with a smile that was pure light. Cut your son's cord. With trembling hands, Michael cut the umbilical cord, officially separating his son from Emily's body and making him an independent person. 7 pounds 4 ounces, the nurse announced after weighing the completely healthy baby. When they placed the baby in his arms for the first time, Michael thought his heart was simply going to stop. The child was perfect, tiny fingers that immediately grabbed his eyes, that opened for a moment to look directly at him, and a face that was a perfect mix of Emily and, well, someone else, but that no longer mattered. Hello, little guy, Michael murmured, his voice broken by emotion. I'm your dad. I've been waiting for you my whole life. Emily, exhausted but radiant, extended her arms. Let me see him. Michael carefully placed the baby in Emily's arms, and the image of the two of them together was something he knew he would remember for the rest of his life. He's perfect, Emily whispered, examining every detail of her son's face. What are we going to name him? During the last 2 months, they had discussed names dozens of times but had never reached a final decision. How about Matteo? Michael suggested. It means gift of God. Emily looked at the baby, then at Michael. Matteo Harrington. She tested the name. I like it. But what, are you sure you want him to have your last name? Technically, Emily, Michael interrupted her softly. There is nothing technical about this. I am his father in every way that matters, and I want the whole world to know that this is my son. Tears ran freely down Emily's face. You know what, you're right. Matteo Harrington sounds perfect. At that moment, as if he understood they were talking about him, the baby opened his eyes and looked directly at Michael. And in those dark, innocent eyes, Michael saw his complete future: sleepless nights and first steps, first words in soccer games, help with homework, and conversations about life. He saw unconditional love, real purpose, and the opportunity to be the kind of father he himself had needed as a child. I love you, he said to Emily, leaning in to kiss her softly. Both of you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. We love you too, Emily replied, adjusting the blanket around Matteo. Don't we, little one? We love Daddy. 6 months later, Michael was sitting on the living room floor of their new family home. Not the mansion he'd had before, but a normal-sized house in a safe, unostentatious suburb, with Matteo in his lap, reading him a book about farm animals. And this is a cat, Michael said, pointing to the picture. Can you say cat? Matteo, now 6 months old, responded with a joyful babble that Michael chose to interpret as a perfectly pronounced cat. Emily entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee and sat down next to them on the floor. She had returned to work part-time as an art teacher at a private school, a job Michael had helped her secure, but which she had earned completely on her own merit. How was your day? Michael asked her, wrapping an arm around her while still holding Matteo. Amazing, Emily smiled. My students are working on a project about non-traditional families, and I couldn't help but think of us. We are a non-traditional family, completely. Emily laughed. We have the millionaire who left his company to be a full-time dad, the art teacher who fell in love with the same man twice, and the baby who has the most devoted father in the world despite not sharing his DNA. Michael looked at Matteo, who had grabbed the book and was trying to eat it. You know what? You're right. We are completely non-traditional, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Not even for your old life of luxury without complications. Especially not for that, Michael responded without hesitation. My old life was empty. I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. Emily snuggled closer to him. And what truly matters? Michael looked around their living room, which was a complete mess of baby toys, parenting books, and the small evidence of a life truly lived. He looked at Emily, who had paint smudges on her hands from her work that day, hair slightly messy from chasing a 6-month-old. He looked at Matteo, who was now happily drooling on the animal book. This, he said simply, this chaotic, imperfect, completely unpredictable life. This family we built together. This love that is more real than anything I've ever felt before. Even when Matteo wakes us up every 2 hours, Emily joked. Especially then, Michael laughed because those 2 a.m. moments when he cries and we get up together to comfort him when we work as a team to take care of him, those are the moments when I feel most alive. Emily stood up and extended her arms toward Matteo. "Come here, little guy. It's time for your dinner." While Emily fed Matteo, Michael watched them with a sense of gratitude so intense, it almost overwhelmed him. 3 years ago, he had been the richest, most miserable man in the country. Now technically, he had less money. He had sold most of his properties and put the majority of his fortune into trusts for Matteo and charities. Less corporate power, he had delegated most of the company's daily operations, and definitely less free time. But he was infinitely richer in every way that mattered. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked, noticing his reflective expression. "I'm thinking," Michael replied, "about how close I came to losing all of this a second time." "What do you mean? That night at the restaurant when I saw you for the first time in 3 years, I had the option of simply leaving. I could have pretended I hadn't recognized you. I could have paid my bill and walked out of your life forever." Emily froze. "You considered doing that for approximately 2 seconds, Michael admitted. "My first instinct was to run because seeing you immediately made me realize how empty my life had been without you. And what made you stay?" Michael smiled, remembering that moment that had changed everything. "I saw you holding your back because it hurt, and I realized that no matter how uncomfortable seeing you made me feel, I couldn't go knowing that you were struggling alone. I didn't even know about David then. No, but I knew something was wrong. And more than that, I knew that I still loved you. I had spent 3 years lying to myself about that, but the moment I saw you, I knew I had never stopped loving you." Emily finished feeding Matteo and put him on her shoulder to burp him. "You know what the craziest thing about all this is? What that David abandoning me was the best thing that ever could have happened." Michael looked at her in surprise. "How can you say that? Because if he hadn't abandoned me, I never would have been working at that restaurant that night. Never would have seen you again. We never would have had this second chance." Emily walked toward Michael and sat on his lap with a sleeping Matteo in her arms. And more importantly, she continued, "If he hadn't abandoned me, I never would have learned that I can survive alone. When we got married the first time, I was dependent on you for everything. I needed you to be my salvation. And now I know I can take care of myself and Matteo if necessary. Which means I'm with you because I want to be with you, not because I need to be with you. And that makes our love so much stronger." Michael kissed her softly, careful not to wake Matteo. "I love you, Emily. You and this little miracle. More than words can express." "We love you too," Emily whispered against his lips. "Forever." As the sun set through their living room windows, painting everything in golden hues, Michael realized he had found something he had been looking for his whole life without even knowing it. Real purpose, unconditional love, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be. He had spent decades chasing business success, accumulating wealth, building an empire that would impress the world. But it turned out that true wealth wasn't measured in numbers in a bank account. It was measured in moments like this. A baby sleeping in the arms of the woman he loved in a house full of laughter and love, knowing that tomorrow he would wake up to do it all over again. And for the first time in his life, Michael Harrington was truly rich.